Hello everyone, welcome to another art tutorial video by myself, Sean Dixon. Today I'd like to talk to you about some acrylic work I did recently, and I haven't done acrylics in a long time, so I really wanted to test it out and I really wanted to generally see how the medium itself works. So here I have um, some concept art from my story. This is Valenza. She's with her spear. Um, she's essentially the one that can tell people's destinies. And up here I have the eye, or the globe, of all knowing. Essentially, this is the globe that's owned by the Lady Queen Jilly, and it essentially has the power to tell you your destiny. So each of these characters have the power to tell you your destiny. And I really wanted to do some impressionism arts because I heard acrylics are good for show and impression. So I want to talk to you a bit about some of the features I learned with acrylics. So first of all, I'd like to talk about this sort of crumpled effect I got here. When you keep your acrylics really wet, you essentially get this sort of crumpled type of paper look. And I thought it was really cool because it shows kind of like a more 3D texture to your landscape. And I thought I could take advantage of that, which it was kind of lucky it happened here because this is where all the essentially the forestry and the landscape resides. So that's the first thing I wanted to talk about. The second thing was to describe the difficulties of getting detail with the hair. So acrylics I found are actually quite difficult to get a significant amount of small detail. They're more known for wide landscape type of art, and just because of the brushes, sometimes you need a little bit of a smaller brush to get some of the finer detail. But the problem with smaller brushes is they tend to flay out a little much. For example, this brush right here, you can see kind of it's already starting to flay out in some of the combed hairs, and the tip isn't as fine anymore after you've used it a couple times. And generally, smaller brushes also bend a lot easier, so they'll get a little bit of flaky marks at the end of your painting, and it'll be hard to get a lot of detail in this instance. So the way I like to get detail in the hair is I like to use layers. So essentially what I'll do is I'll start with like a lighter layer, like around the general area of the hair, and I'll try to follow the lines of the braids as much as I can. And then what I'll do is I'll go over with switches of darker type paints, like darker browns and darker blacks in this particular scenario. And you'll see it in my cliffs as well, that I generally go and I do like a brush of yellow and a brush of beige to start with a light texture on the cliff, and then I'll go over with some darker patches of rocks to show shadow in the areas. So that's generally the idea behind getting the amount of detail with acrylics. Otherwise, your acrylics are very wonderful when it comes to showing landscape. You should see the sky here. This is generally just getting your brush a little wet and doing a bit of swirly strokes with your brush. And I find the more wet your paintbrush is, the lighter the color is. So essentially, when part of your paintbrush is a little bit dry, it gets this sort of darker blue area, and you can kind of go over like this. Use this to your advantage. Have part of your paintbrush drier, and then part of your paintbrush wetter, and it kind of produces this sort of dry, darker pattern and the wet aftermath of the faded clouds. The good thing about acrylics is they're very, very good with landscape, because even if you do sort of a poor job of showing like the trees in the background, like my trees are not bad in my opinion, but you get the general idea, right? So like you get the general idea that there's trees there and there's bushes in the background and there's sky. But to the person first seeing this, they might be a little confused on what they're looking at. But the good thing about being confused is that it's left off through interpretation. So you give them the general idea of the landscape, and then the rest is up to them essentially. So which is really cool about acrylics. I found that dry blending is the best way to do blended acrylic work. So acrylics are really different than pastel in the sense that I was doing a bit of pastel work before with my series of dog art, where I would just put down a bit of pastel and I would blend it with my finger, because that's how versatile pastel actually was. But with acrylics is a little different because you can't actually blend with your finger. You have to blend with the brush itself. What I found was when I'm blending darker patches of areas, I do the dark patch almost last, because it's better to go down with a lighter patch first and then go over with a darker patch, because if you were to go over with a black, that's all it would remain to be. Essentially, black is sort of the permanent acrylic type paint, and as you can see here,